Yeah, you got your camera crew. What's that all about?
Very cool.
So in the days of Uber 1.0, as some are calling it, the ethos was, do whatever it takes to get ahead. Nothing else really matters. And now, with you in charge and Uber co-founder Travis Kalanick out, things seem to be going a little bit differently. What's it been like doing the right thing?
So far, so good. I've been I've had the job for about a year, and every company goes through different stages in its life, and what Travis and team did was they built an incredible, important company, and the board brought me on to change direction, change strategy, et cetera. And for me, it's pretty easy if you say do the right thing. Ultimately, our growth is going to be a function of our own innovation, what we invent, what we build, but it's also going to be based on the relationships that we have with our driver partners and the cities that we work with. And ultimately, when you have a service that's as important as Uber in terms of how we touch people on an everyday basis, how many people that we have who are making money on our platform the way that they want to, you have to take into account actively the needs of your partners, and you have to treat them like partners. And I think this is just a kind of continuation of the company getting into its next stage of growth. So it's been a year, so far so good, but we got lots and lots of work and lots of stuff to build ahead of us.
Would you say this year has been better or worse than you thought it'd be?
I had no freaking clue what I was getting into, so I didn't have any predisposed notions. But what amazes me about the company is how many people we touch, how many cities we touch, and what's different about us than a lot of other digital companies is that we are a digital company that is organizing the physical world. You push a button and a car shows up. You push a button and a Big Mac shows up within 30 minutes. And the physical world is a lot messier than the digital world. This collide of the physical and the digital is messy, it's unpredictable, it's tough to organize, and it's also more fundamental. So the dialogues that we have to have with governments, regulators, et cetera, is something that I expected, but you never really can anticipate what it's like until you're in the middle of it. So it's been a great ride, and I'm learning as I go along.
So Uber has recently gotten into bikes and scooters,
Yeah.
and just recently in San Francisco, the MTA decided that it would give permits to skip and scoot.
Yes.
What was that like for you? How much of an effect is that going to have on your scooter strategy?
Listen, we weren't happy about the result of that process. Now, the good news is that we've got a bunch of jump bikes on the street now, so we have connectivity into the SF market. But you do have to put things into perspective, which is we are a global company. We're in 600 plus cities all around the world. The largest single city, for example, that we operate in on a trip basis is Sao Paulo. So while we weren't happy with the SF decision, hopefully we can be in SF. I think that we're doing a really, really good job on the bike front, et cetera. What I found is that over a long period of time, local regulators do the right thing for the people living in their street. And I think that if we continue to prove ourselves in terms of being a great provider, being a quality provider, being able to drive very high utility and utilization of our assets on the street, we will get there in SF and most other cities that we operate in. It's these early days when you're thrashing. But the good news for us is SF said no. There are 599 other cities for us to target, and we think a fair amount of them are going to say yes.
Are you going to appeal the process in San Francisco or just kind of accept the no?
That's a TBD. I think the team is working on it, but we got plenty of cities to work in. And we are in the business of both bikes and scooters, both through partnership and through proprietary means as well. And this is the advantage that we have in building a platform. One of the big changes that we want to make is that take Uber from being just a ride-hailing company to moving Uber to be a mobility company, a transportation company. And really what we're trying to do is disaggregate car ownership, right? It's cars are, it's an incredible piece of engineering that is used for multiple use cases, right? It's going to work, taking your kids to school, maybe not this crowd, but trust me, you'll get there, getting groceries, going out to dinner, et cetera. And so you had to build this one piece of engineering that could do all of these multiple tasks. And it didn't make sense to have purpose-built vehicles for each of these use cases, but when you get to dense environments like a city, you get to service architecture and services that are constantly available, on your phone, you can actually start to disaggregate each of those use cases. And so, for example, in San Francisco, if you are going 2.5 miles, you want to get to a place 2.5 miles away, and you're going alone, you shouldn't take a car. Mm-hmm. That's bad for the city. It's not the right decision for you to make. And the advantage that we have is that we have an incredible audience who's telling us where they're coming from, where they want to go to, and we can then pick for that audience. And by the way, the audience is going to, the individual user is going to make their choice. We can optimize for them as to how is it that you want to travel those 2.4 miles, 2.5 miles, and in our case, we're going to want to get you on a jump bike. It's good for the city has less traffic. It's probably better for the user because it's a healthy way to get around, and you might be able to get there faster. And overall, it increases engagement with our platform, and bit by bit by bit, we can start disaggregating the car and move into a complete service environment. The tech behind that, the routing algorithms that you have to build, what you offer to the users is actually really cool, complex math that our engineers are pretty excited to build out.
This morning, Lyft announced it's bringing its scooters to Denver.
Yeah.
When will Uber deploy its first batch of scooters?
Well, we have a partnership with Lime, and we will integrate Lime into our choices, and Lime is in many, many cities. And obviously, we continue to expand Jump pretty aggressively. It's in Sacramento, it's in a bunch of other cities. And we will look to deploy our own scooters. We haven't specifically talked about where we're going to do it or when we're going to do it, but we did get a license from Santa Monica, so you can expect to see Uber or Jump scooters in Santa Monica sooner rather than later. Okay,
so they would be Uber/Jump scooters, or would they be Lime scooters branded with Uber or Jump?
Probably a combination of yes, all the above.
Okay.
Right, and listen, that's the advantage that we have in building a platform. Ultimately, what we're going to optimize for is the customer experience. And we want the customer to come to Uber to have as many choices as possible, and some of them we're going to serve, but then third parties and trusted partners, and Lime is a terrific company, will be there to serve the customer as well. And we're going to worry about kind of the monetization later to some extent. My philosophy on this stuff is you got to be willing to cannibalize yourself. You've got to be solving for the customer. And over a period of time, that's going to pay back. So what we have with our platform strategy is essentially optionality around all of these choices. And we've announced, for example, on the product, you'll see a mode switcher that allows users to be able to essentially switch from a car mode to a scooter mode or to a bike mode or a rental car mode, et cetera.
So I guess what's the benefit of having, Lime or Uber branded Lime scooters versus your own Uber scooters versus your own Jump scooters? I mean, why not just, if you already have this partnership with Lime, why then create your own?
I think we are going to be testing and learning at this point, right? So I think we're going to have a long relationship with Lime. And I'd say you look at Amazon, right? Amazon is selling its own product, but always has marketplace product available. And I think that as long as you've got that marketplace product, it's a price check, it's a quality check. And ultimately, if you are increasing choice for the consumer, consumers like choice. And are having Lime scooters and Jump bikes, et cetera, on our app is only going to give our consumers more choice. And what we've seen, for example, in SF, San Francisco, is that Uber users who are using Jump bikes, they tend to take Ubers less often, during rush hour, so they're taking less cars during rush hour, but their engagement with the platform has increased significantly, 15% during those hours. So you've got higher engagement with the platform with a more kind of a higher breadth of use, and that is the beginning of disaggregating car ownership, which is the ultimate goal. And I don't think there's any other company in the world who's positioned to create all these services either proprietarily or through a third party the way that we are.
And so you mentioned that just maybe 10 minutes ago or so, you announced Mode Switch, which you can read more about on TechCrunch.com. And I could envision you adding autonomous cars into that. So you have your traditional ride hailing, you have your bikes, your scooters, you have Uber Rent, and then it could just be, oh, hail an autonomous ride.
Yes, absolutely. And we will have a combination of the user declaring what they're looking for, and then we will also look at your patterns. You know, there may be a route that's a complex route that includes 3 unprotected left turns, and we may not suggest autonomous for you, right? When autonomous technology becomes mature, but if it's a pretty simple route, it's in an area that has been properly mapped, it's right turns only, it's pretty easy, we'll say, hey, autonomous can be a choice for you. So I think there's this drama around, is it autonomous or is it people? And the reality is people and computers together are the thing, right? Even you've seen some car manufacturers try to over-automate and going all the way to automation, which doesn't work. People and computers actually work better than each of them work on a standalone basis. And we are having the capability of bringing in autonomous technology, third-party technology, Lime, our own product, all together to create a hybrid. And then it'll be our AI and intelligence and our engineers picking out the use cases that we present to the consumer in a way that optimizes for the consumer. And we think as long as you're optimizing for the consumer, you're not thinking about your own revenue, et cetera, over a long period of time, people are going to form habits that tend to be aligned with companies that are thinking of consumer first. And that's exactly where we're aiming as a company.
So there was a report in The Information a couple weeks ago, or maybe a week ago, about Uber considering divesting the self-driving car unit. You said yesterday to Reuters that not now.
Not in the plans. Yeah.
But is it true that investors are kind of nudging you to divest the unit?
I think I've got lots of investors with lots of different opinions. Happily, I've got a board of directors, and we discuss these with the board of directors. Right now, the total focus of the company is, as it relates to autonomous, is how do we get back on the road in as safe as manner possible? That's the focus. And I think that we're building an enormous asset of incredible value with autonomous. There are very few companies in the world that have the operational, the software capability that we have, and the advantage that we have in building autonomous under the same roof as a network is pretty incredible. That we are also combining with partnerships with companies like Toyota, and we'll also work with third parties in bringing their autonomous technology as well. So it's not just about our internal autonomous technology. We think that's the right strategy to kind of bridge the gap between a world where you got human drivers and now you're introducing these personal electric vehicles, autonomous technology will come in. That kind of a hybrid mode we think is the right mode for at least the next 10 years. How we monetize our autonomous technology, et cetera, we're going to have all the options of the world, and we're creating big value there, and I think those kinds of decisions can wait. For the next, for the foreseeable future, autonomous is in-house, and we're going to work as hard as we can to develop that technology.
There was, unfortunately, of course, the fatal crash earlier this year. I mean, how big of a wake-up call was that for you?
Oh, it was enormous. It was an enormous wake-up call for the company. And you think about these possibilities theoretically, and real life just hits you in the face. So we instantly took our cars off the road. It was absolutely the right thing to do. And we have been fundamentally rethinking our building process, testing process, simulation process, testing and track process. All of it we're essentially rebuilding from the ground up. I actually think we're going to be a better company for it, but we are taking this stuff as seriously as the situation demands it.
Yeah, because I know that, so Uber's self-driving car permit expired in California, and you decided not to renew it. When do you think you might apply for a renewal of that permit?
We were focused on getting back on the road, and I think we're going to get back on the road sometime this year. Where we do it, how we do it is something that we will disclose when the time comes.
Okay, sounds good. And so also, I mean, I think this is probably not news to anyone at this point, but Uber's going to go public next year.
Yes.
That's still the case. Knock
Knock on whatever this is made
yeah,
of.
I'm not sure, maybe plastic. But so with going public, I mean, there's already a fair amount of scrutiny on Uber, and when you enter the public market, investors are kind of thinking in these 3-month periods, and
3-month periods called quarters.
right.
Yes.
And so, but a couple weeks ago, I mean, Uber kind of you announced your Q2 results. There was a significant number of losses. How are you going to
Measured in the billions, yes.
Right. Yeah. How are you going to please investors?
I think that investors are not as short-term as people make them out to be. I think the public markets is willing to pay for growth and is willing to pay very big value for growth. And the market size that we're dealing with in replacing car ownership, the transportation market that we're going after is $6 trillion. And we're doing close to $50 billion in gross bookings. So the size of the market ahead of us and the growth ahead of us is extraordinary. And within Uber, we've got the base ride-sharing business that continues to grow, that's global, that now we're gaining share on our competition, and really we are the unrivaled global leader in ride-sharing. We've got the Eats business, which is now the largest delivery platform in the world outside of China. And then we've got businesses like bikes and scooters and freight. And if you look at Eats and bikes and freight, and you track these three businesses in the early days, and I'd say Eats is in the middle days, against UberX and the growth of UberX, we've got three businesses that kind of look like UberX, right? And the Uber business, the UberX business, which is the largest part of Uber, there have been few companies in the world that have been able to grow at those rates and scale at those rates, and we've got actually 4 of them in one portfolio. So I think when we tell that story to investors and the street, we're going to find plenty of investors who want that kind of growth opportunity in a market as large as the $6 trillion transportation market. And if there's an investor who is obsessed with quarterly results, probably not the right investor for us. But if there's an investor that is interested in a company that is revolutionizing transportation and is by far the best positioned in terms of the assets under our portfolio, along with autonomous technology as well, then we're the one to invest in. So I think we're going to find plenty of investors in the public market. There's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of discipline that you have to bring into play. But listen, I was a public market CEO for 13, 14 years. I understand the gig there. Yeah,
yeah, you definitely have experience there. And but still, I mean, so Uber has recently brought on a CFO, a COO, and yeah, I kind of just want to change the pace a bit because there was a New York Times report about your COO, Barney Harford, allegedly making some racially insensitive comments toward some employees. Was that news to you, or were you hearing about it the first time when you read that story?
I had heard of certain issues, and listen, it was a learning moment for all of us. And you have to take these moments and learn, and more importantly, change and improve as a company. And this issue of representation of women in the workforce at all levels, underrepresented people in the workforce at all levels, biases that make their way into both how you build products, but how you help people develop their careers. These are real issues that we're dealing with, that every single company is dealing with, and I'm learning every day about them. So we are, working that. There's a process there. I think Barney wrote an apology, a really heartfelt apology letter to the company. He and I both have learned a lot from this, And the real question is like, what are we doing about it?
Right.
And my whole team now has undergone training as it relates to biases. We are learning as we go. And the most important thing for me is awareness and then measurement and results. And we are now measuring representation across the company, looking at our recruiting processes, looking at how we promote our employees and what those promotion rates look like. And I'm already seeing results there, numerical results, as far as the company improving its representation of women and underrepresented people at the company, but more importantly, at all levels of the company. And that's what I'm going to focus on now. And I think, listen, was the New York Times article fun? No, it was a shitty day. But the question is, how do we learn from it? And I think we're going to be a better company. We would have been a better company anyway, but we've taken this as a learning moment, and God damn it, we're improving.
And I just want to briefly quote Ellen Pao quickly. And so for those unfamiliar with Ellen Pao, she's an investor currently with Project Include. I guess entered the mainstream when she sued Kleiner Perkins Caulfield for gender discrimination. So in response to the New York Times article, she said, quote, "If the CEO wanted to fix Uber's culture, why did he hire Barney as COO? Dara worked with Harvard for years. This behavior can't be news to him. Is he clueless, or does he just not care?" How do you respond to that?
And what I'd respond to that is I've known Barney for years and years and years, and he's an incredible person, and he cares, and I don't think that a comment that might have been taken as insensitive and happened to report by large news organizations should mark a person. I don't think that's fair. And I'm sure I've said things that have been insensitive, and you take that as a learning moment, and the question is, does a person want to change? Does a person want to improve? Does a person understand when they did something wrong and then change behaviors? And I've known Barney for years, and that's why I stand 100% behind him. And I'll say it again, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life as well. Listen, I saw in my last job, I observed as we were going through this, when I wanted a beer after work, usually I had a beer with one of the guys. And because I was comfortable, because it was, it was a person who looked like me, a person with whom I could be more casual and I could have a conversation. These guys worked for me. They were getting access to me that was not fair. And that could have shown up in a New York Times article. And that could have marked me. That's not who I am. I learned, I corrected, I'm aware, and the question is, what do you do? This is an issue that everyone is fighting, and I will tell you, Barney takes it personally, and he is a champion, and he will be a champion as it relates to these matters. He's one of the good people.
Okay. And so about a year ago, I was actually sitting up here, well, different venue, but with Bozoma St. John, Uber's now former chief brand officer.
Yes.
She has since left. I remember speaking to her when she left, and I kind of joked like, "Oh, like what happened? Like, did anything horrible happen?" And she said no. But about a month or two later, this report comes out. I think it was in Reuters about how Leanne Hornsey, former SVP of People, am I getting that title right?
Yes.
Okay. So Leanne Hornsey,
Head of People, Chief HRO. Yeah.
Yeah. So made some comments directed toward not only Bozoma but also toward Bernard Coleman. I mean, of course Leanne has since left, but I mean, what does that say about some of the diversity efforts at Uber?
I think you've got to, I would say that judge the diversity efforts at Uber based on role that she's in now. I think is a terrific role, and I think just like she did a lot of good for us. She was incredible for her brand. She's a fighter. She stands up. I think she'll do incredibly well in her career. I would say judge us based on what we do. And again, we're going to make mistakes, but can we learn from those mistakes, and can we be actually a positive force for change? I absolutely believe that we can be a positive force for change as it relates to women's representation in tech, underrepresented people in tech. That is a core part of my job. I think we did a great job at Expedia, and it is absolutely something that I expect to execute on here.
Okay. And then, so back in the day when, when Eric Holder, former Attorney General, made some recommendations for Uber, one of those recommendations was to promote Bernard Coleman, the global head of diversity and inclusion, to Chief Diversity Officer. Instead, Uber went with Bo Young Lee from Marsh. How did you land on that decision? Why not follow the recommendation and promote Bernard?
I think Bo was the right person, and I think we'll prove it out that she's the right person. Bo is incredible. Bernard has been an incredible contributor for the company. I think will continue to be a great contributor, but I'd say judge us based on what Bo and we do, and I think we absolutely made the right choice. And
so now that Leanne's gone, the chief people officer, whatever she was, is Bo reporting directly to you?
Bo is going to report to the chief people officer at the company.
Okay.
And I am looking for a new chief people officer. And that was actually another recommendation where that the head of diversity report to me. And to me, diversity and inclusion have to be a core part of everything that the company does. Has to be a core part of your people strategy. And I want Bo and my chief people officer working together fundamentally, not just on the diversity of the company, but also on the core culture. Like, we're really trying to shift the culture of the company going forward. So Bo is going to report into our chief people officer, and she and I, more than monthly, are constantly having exchanges on how things are going. And I think that's the optimal structure, which is open communication with me, working directly with the CEO, but part of the core strategy of the company, because I do think that this is one of the things that we have to execute on.
Okay. And just since we're a little low on time, I just want to talk about Uber's long-term vision a bit, and because I mean, you have traditional ride-hailing, you have Eats, you have Freight, you have Elevate, you have bikes and scooters and Uber Red.
Lots of stuff.
Lots of things going on. As of today, your core business is traditional ride-hailing. 10 years from now, what do you think your core business will be?
I think our core business will be getting you from point A to B. You know, we want to be the Amazon of transportation. Any way that you want to either move around or you want to get or move things or food in an urban destination, we want you to come to Uber. And we think because we've got a global scope, because we've got an unrivaled audience, and because of our technology, we're going to be able to offer to the consumer more choice and the right choice at the right price for anyone getting from one point in their city to another point. And ultimately, hopefully 10 years from now, no one in the audience is going to own a car.
But do you think it'll be through ride-hailing? Or, like, I guess
it's going to be, I'm actually very, very bullish on personal individual electric vehicles.
Okay.
So I think a lot of people talk about the scooters, and that's kind of a scooter obsession. That's V1. And we actually created a whole new organization, new mobility organization under Rachel Holt, who ran operations in the US. So it's a very, very, Rachel took a huge job to take on a huge job. And it is all about figuring out whether as a service or as a principle, where individual electric transportation goes in cities. And individual transportation in cities should not be through cars. It should be through something else. And we want to be a part of figuring out what that mode is, and we want to absolutely be a leader in that mode as well. So my guess is 10 years from now, ride-hailing is going to be less than 50% of our business in terms of transactions. I think Eats is going to be enormous, and I think ride-hailing is going to be enormous, but you're going to have we've got to deconstruct that car. Just like the cable bundle is being debundled by a bunch of different services, we've got to debundle and deconstruct the car, and that, to some extent, is a big part of our mission going forward.
And yeah, I guess Elevate is maybe a good note
Yeah.
to end on, kind of future thinking. I mean, how realistic is that you're really going to launch, or because I think 2020 you want to start testing?
Yeah. Listen, it's the true innovators in the early days. They're the ones that you call crazy. So we have to be willing to kind of be called crazy during these days. But it goes to 50% of the world's population lives in cities right now. it's going to go to 2/3 of the world's population, which is this incredible demographic trend, which is behind companies like ours, but it's a huge problem for cities. And cities are not going to be able to continue to build infrastructure the way that they have in the past. And so the two one on vehicles, or just like cities went vertical, residential construction has gone vertical, commercial construction has gone vertical, you actually have to go vertical and go into 3 dimensions with transportation. And you know, it may be underground or maybe overground. We're making a big bet on overground, and with battery technology and rotor technology, et cetera, we think it's doable in the next 5 to 10 years, absolutely, at scale.
Okay. Quick question for those in the audience. How many of you would ride in an Uber Air in the next 5 to 10 years? Raise your hand. Oh.
Awesome. Look at that.
Wow. All right, well, get to work. All right,
Thank you
thanks,
very
Dara.
much. Appreciate it.